All right. Well, good morning to everyone, and thank you all for joining us for our annual legislative meet and greet, which is obviously taking place virtually this year, as so many of our various activities and programs are. I'm Leonardo McClarty and president of the Howard County Chamber, and certainly it's a pleasure to see everyone's smiling face this morning and so forth. For those of you that maybe you haven't actually attended these in the past, this is something that we've done now for about the last 4 or 5 years, and have been fortunate to have Comcast as our partner and sponsor for each of those years. And really, this is something that we do. Typically, it's an opportunity for many of you to just have dialogue and communication with our elected officials, as well as vice versa, for them to be able to talk to representatives of the business and employment community, and really in a more informal fashion, as opposed to when you've come to like our legislative forums that typically are either post-session or pre-session. Certainly this one will have still a little bit more formality than perhaps we would prefer, but as with so much this year, we're making it work and we're continuing to move forward. I think we'll still have some good information and dialogue and exchange of thought over the next hour and a half or so. So just a couple of brief things just in terms of kind of some ground rules and what the agenda will be like for today. The first is obviously everyone is currently muted. What we'll do, because we'll have so many on screen, is we'll ultimately highlight those that are speaking so that they will be kind of the featured presenters during that time. Also, again, we've got everyone currently muted. I think you guys are able to mute yourself, but obviously we can do it on our end as well. And then the other thing is certainly we're going to have basically a conversation this morning and some updates on some county efforts from County Executive Ball. Then we're going to transition and have some dialogue with members of the County Council, General Assembly, Board of Education, and then also a DPZ update. And each one of those will be facilitated by a member of the Chamber's Legislative Affairs Committee. And we'll probably give or take about between 15 and 20 minutes with each one of those. We're going to ask, certainly, if you have questions, we actually encourage you to ask questions. If you'll put them just in the chat, we'll be monitoring that. And then we'll be obviously sharing those with the speakers. Certainly, we have questions prepared on this end if no one asks questions, but I think with the faces that I see represented here, we don't have a lot of bashful people. And so I certainly think we'll end up having some good dialogue again this morning. And so the second thing, before we get started, I want to just recognize and acknowledge the companies that you see behind me on the virtual background. These are the Chamber's 2020 annual partners. And truly, they have been just so supportive of the Chamber. And I can honestly say without their support this year, things would have been probably, I don't know how, I can't put into words how tough they would have been without their support. And so certainly want to make sure that, we acknowledge and thank them. And then with that, I'm going to turn things over to Josh Boakey of Comcast. And as I stated earlier, Comcast has been our premier sponsor of this event now for probably about the last 4 or 5 years, and has been a great partner of the Chamber. And so Josh is going to make some comments on behalf of Comcast, recognize the elected officials that we have with us, and then from there, have a little bit of dialogue with our county executive. And so with that, Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Leonardo, and good morning, everyone. As Leonardo said, my name is Josh Boakey. I'm a Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Comcast here in the region. First, Leonardo, I want to thank you and your team for the leadership here at the Chamber during these really extraordinarily challenging times, as you said. And it's both, I think, an understatement and almost, unfortunately, cliche to say how difficult an economic environment this has become for some within our business community as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Not to mention the personal, family, and professional strains that many of us have endured as well. Before we turn to one of our featured guests this morning, I would like to take a moment to share with everyone here that at Comcast, we have remained open Our fiber network has been and continues to be monitored 24/7 to meet the incredibly changing demands and needs of today. That our customer representatives, our technicians, our engineers, they've all been in the forefront of our efforts to connect everyone. Our business services team continues to work with companies here in Howard County, whether you are a company with a multi-point enterprise service user or a small business looking to adapt to today's changing circumstances. And Connect Everyone for us also includes our community investment initiative, Internet Essentials, which aims to bring affordable, high-speed internet to families and individuals in need here in Howard County community. And we've developed great partnerships, and I would like to highlight a few of those partnerships, such as with the Howard County Public School System, Bright Minds Foundation, the Community Action Council, and others to help connect students in need to the internet that they need today. Now I'd like to recognize our elected officials and the representatives who could join us or will be joining us here this morning. From the Maryland General Assembly, I'd like to recognize Senator Guy Gazzone, Delegate Terry Hill, Delegate Jessica Feldmark, Delegate Jen Terraza, Delegate Courtney Watson, and Delegate Trent Kittleman. And representing the County Council Chair Deb Young, Board of Education Member and Vice Chair Vicki Cutriano, and Obi Shinemir representing U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen's office. Thank you again for joining us this morning, and thank each of you for your dedication to public service within our community. And now I'd like to introduce Howard County Executive Calvin Ball. Dr. Ball really needs little introduction, and I know everyone here is eager to hear from him today. However, for those who may not know, the county executive was first elected to the county council in 2006, where he served until 2018 upon being elected as county executive. With that, let me give a warm virtual welcome to the Honorable Dr. Calvin Ball. Mr. County Executive, good morning. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I am very pleased to be with so many friends and partners, especially during this challenge.
Well, it's great to have you here with us. As Leonardo said, there's some questions that have been prepared. So why don't we go ahead and get right to it? And I think probably the question on everyone's mind these days is, as it relates to COVID-19 pandemic and from a medical standpoint, how is Howard County doing?
So Howard County continues to work through these unprecedented times. We've had a little under 4,000 confirmed cases, and we've unfortunately lost 113 of our residents. Our positivity rate, according to the state, remains around 3%, which is under the 5% goal. And we have made significant strides. You know, at the beginning of this pandemic, we had 2 contact tracers, and we were able to scale up to nearly 50. When the supply chain was completely broken and we couldn't get many supplies, working with our partners, many businesses on the line, our school system who made some important donations. Now we have a stockpile for over 30 days of personal protective equipment. We were trying to increase our testing. And when we set that goal that was research-based of 6,500 tests at least a week, many thought that that was an impossible goal to reach. And I'm pleased to say that now we're at about 8,500 tests per week. And so we have made incredible strides. We are still learning. The information, the research is still evolving, but we're glad in Howard County we're in an okay place, a place that's good enough for us for quite some time to have been aligned with the governor's orders and have reopened to the furthest extent that is allowed by state law. However, we continue to monitor, we continue to work with our partners, and we continue to ensure that safety is a top priority.
Uh, Mr. County Executive, it's as you said, those are great strides, and that really takes. I can only imagine the type of teamwork that from across the county and from county employees and from the business community and residents to make all of that happen. As we now, have now entered into the county's new fiscal year and budget. Can you share with us a little bit about how this pandemic is either impacting the current budget and what do you see ahead as it relates to county finances?
So we are now entered into a new fiscal year. We had a budget process that happened last spring. There were some cuts to the budget from the county council. And so we're still working through some of those issues and some things put into contingency to help move our community forward. What we've seen is an impact of about a little under $10 million on COVID-related expenses. We were pleased, however, to get $57 million in CARES Act funding. Us being a jurisdiction that's under $500,000, we had to go through additional process issues with the state. And then once we got that money, at least half of it went directly to the health department on specific health-related issues. However, we were able to allocate other resources to help some of the need. And we are looking at anywhere from about $25 to $35 million in less revenue in the upcoming year. And just to put that into context, the last few years, we've only seen about a $25 million increase. So we are still having some challenges. And I think it's important now, even more than ever, that we make the investments that not only help out our community moving forward, but help our economy.
You had mentioned, talked a little bit about the CARES funding, and from the small business standpoint, I guess as I understand it, some of the portions of that CARES funding is utilized to help some of the retail, restaurants, perhaps hotels. To date, can you describe maybe a little bit about how that CARES funding has had impact for our businesses here in the business community?
So as many of you are aware, the federal government began to try to help out through PPP loans. And we saw about 1,100 Howard County businesses get those loans. We also saw a great deal of frustration, a first come, first serve, where usually the biggest businesses that, while every business likely needed some help, many of these businesses might have needed it the least, get the first scoops of that money. At the state level, we saw about 370 businesses helped through state funding. Once we got the funding that I indicated after the health department, we allocated immediately $5.7 million to help out our small businesses. And we are already working directly with over 700 small local businesses. And our goal through the application process was to ensure that we help the smallest of the small, the businesses that we could impact greatly, and the businesses that, but for our support, might not be able to survive this challenging economic time. And so we are continuing to work with businesses. I want to personally thank the Chamber in Leonardo, our Economic Development Authority, Visit Howard County, and our tourism for leading the efforts and continuing to work with businesses, and many of the people on this line who, on behalf of your businesses, have stayed in close contact with the county government and our county leaders to ensure that we could open as safely and as efficiently as possible while keeping businesses afloat.
Well, again, I come back to it's really right that overall team effort and that leadership, and even before the pandemic has come about, I've always believed that Howard County overall has been a leader in the state, both from a business standpoint and from a government standpoint. talk a little bit about one of those other challenges in childcare. That's also right on the top of mind. So I know of a lot of folks, and some have said that until the childcare and sufficient childcare is able to get back up and running, that is a real Achilles heel in terms of having the economy be able to move forward. From your standpoint, from a county standpoint, what does that landscape look like right now, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge and thank our congressional delegation and our state delegation. I know we have some members on the line. They have remained in close contact and have been so supportive and positive during this challenging time. It's really tough. We've got about a third of our local government employees working remotely, and we are trying to ensure that we keep county government services running. And so as it relates directly to childcare, I note the school system is on the line. I know that they've been making some tough decisions on trying to ensure that our educators and our students stay safe, and looking at virtual learning and other options, and working with our Recreation and Parks and our Department of Community Resources and Services and our partners at the library and community college to ensure that we do continue that education and that opportunity for all of our families. And so one of the entities that we've been helping with our HOCO RISE grants, $5.7 million, have been child care centers. And so the child care centers, we've been trying to help them move forward with those grants, and our Recreation and Parks started Rec Zone and are going to offer recreation opportunities to supplement what the school system and our partners at the library are doing. And those who are unable or having challenges to afford it, our Department of Community Resources and Services will help ensure that there are supplemental support there.
That's all really great news. One final question. A year ago, when we would ask this question, perhaps in 2019, we would ask, what would be your remaining priorities through the end of the year? And no one, of course, could have foreseen that, a year later, we'd be asking this question in a completely upside down environment. But with that said, as you look out to the rest of the year, what are your focus areas right now? And perhaps even as you go into 2021, how do you see things looking ahead?
So I think we find ourselves, as we all know, at the intersection of some great challenges, however, some great opportunities. We're seeing a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen since 1918. And that has revealed a lot of inequities when it comes to health and wellness. We're seeing comorbidity rates that relate to things like diabetes, obesity. There was a report that came out just recently that looked at potential challenges when it came to vaping and lung disease. And so I think we have the challenge of the health and wellness, but also the opportunity to look at how we can be a healthier, more well society. And that's just on the physical front. We are many times seeing mental health challenges, addiction challenges that are exacerbated by what's going on with COVID. And then, as we've talked a lot about, we're seeing financial and fiscal challenges, the likes of which we haven't seen since the 30s. So how can we shore up our workforce and our businesses and support entrepreneurs? How can we not just get through and survive this challenging time, but get on the other side and thrive, so that we do create the new innovations of tomorrow. We do empower that emerging workforce. And then I think we're having important conversations around a racial awakening, one that we haven't seen the likes of which since the 60s, and talking about diversity and inclusion and equity, not just as buzzwords or as ideals, but in practice. How can we create a society so that the next generation, the generation after that, can look back at us and say, we seized this moment of opportunity, and together we've made the world a better place?
Well, Mr. County Executive, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. I want to appreciate also leadership from the council and our state representatives that are joining us here as well, and of course the school system. And before I turn it over to Leonardo, I just want to say that, it really puts it into, very upfront and center when we do this as a virtual forum, because everyone on here you can see in one quick snapshot from the private sector and the public sector is all contributing to helping to get us through this pandemic, and then hopefully take us to a place that might be even better that we couldn't have foreseen from before, which may be hard to see now, but I think we will get from here to there. So thank you, and Leonardo, I'd like to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Josh. And again, thank you, County Executive Ball, for joining us this morning. And so we're going to continue moving forward full steam ahead. And so next, we're going to have some comments and dialogue with our General Assembly members. And so I'm going to ask Cheryl Brown, who is an attorney and partner with Davis Acknor, Rappaport, and Scowney. She's going to facilitate this discussion and with us. And so with that, I'm going to ask Delegate Feldmark, Senator Gazone, in particular, if they would get ready, and certainly we'll, hear from Senator Gazone first, and then from Delegate Feldmark, and then we'll have also some comments from Delegate Kittleman. But certainly, I want to also encourage everyone, if you've got questions of them, to again put in the chat room, or if you want to even raise your hand with the little icon there. We're certainly following all of the participant lists. We'll make sure that we acknowledge you to get your questions asked. And with that, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to Cheryl.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I know that typically this is a much more informal event. We're all having drinks and walking around outside and trying to talk to as many people as possible. So we are going to hopefully have a very informal dialogue and talk with our representatives. And please, if anyone has questions, concerns, comments, put them in the chat. I'm going to be monitoring those as well. And I have a few questions just in case people are shy, which, as Leonardo says, I don't foresee that with this group. But I do want to start with Senator Guy Gazone, and I want him to make some comments. He is the Senate Majority Leader, District 13. Oh, no, sorry. I'll let him speak when he speaks, but I'm going to have him speak first and give kind of an update as he goes into probably a new General Assembly in 2021. And then I'm going to have Delegate Feldmark speak as well, and then we'll turn it over to Delegate Trent Kittleman. So Senator Gazone, would you like to speak first? And you may have to unmute.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you all. No, I'm not the majority leader any longer, but I think I got kind of a better job. So I am the now chair of the Budget Committee, which I guess also it may not have been the best job going into this year. It started in this year. I became the chair at the beginning of the year. It's a great responsibility and an important responsibility. We have a $40 billion budget annually, and my committee reviews all that, makes changes, has discussions about it all, and then ultimately approves the budget. And as you can imagine, as you've heard on the media constantly, the challenges that states and locals are having with the pandemic and what's going on. Sort of and I'll start with the budget in that there's one thing I want to tell you that is driving everything. And the simple thing that is driving everything is that if we get the assistance that is being talked about on the federal level, Maryland and I believe the locals will be okay. That doesn't mean things will be great, but we'll be okay. And let me put that a little more into context. So we have essentially over the next couple of years, $2 billion problem every year for the next couple of years. That's big. When I say that we have a $40 billion budget. The reality also is that of that, in terms of general funds, is about half of that. So $2 billion on $20 billion is a big chunk of money, and would require some pretty significant cuts. The amount of money that we got in CARES dollars, after all the calculations and what was done on the national level, is somewhat equivalent to that. But the CARES money is specifically designed to deal with issues that are related to problems caused by COVID. And so it doesn't solve loss of revenue. And loss of revenue, of course, occurs because people are out of work. And if they're out of work, they're not paying taxes and all the rest. So although that money is helpful and important right now, this CARES dollars, it can only be used for certain purposes, and it can only, it must be used by the end of December. So what that puts us in, and what you all have been seeing, if you are interested in paying attention to things like the Board of Public Works, which is really just the governor, the comptroller, and the treasurer of the state. When we're out of session, we have we sort of cede a lot of power to that board in terms of what can be done with regard to the budget and what they're doing. And we've already seen one round of cuts made for the upcoming budget, but there's been sort of a step back a little bit to see what the federal government is going to do. And that's why I say it's so critical what the federal government does. If in fact some level of money comes, and hopefully in the same proportions that we got last time in CARES, as I said, we'll be okay. There'll be cuts, there'll be changes, but we'll keep rolling along pretty well. If not, $2 billion worth of cuts across the state budget could affect some programs in significant ways and affect folks in a lot of different ways. So in the meantime, we're spending a lot of time digging through and looking at and trying to analyze everything that's going on. Interesting facts are, one, withholding taxes actually are doing okay, surprisingly enough. What isn't doing well is sales tax. And that is really what is plowing a hole in Maryland's budget. We've had some recent good news in some ways. The expectation and the closeout of last year's budget, it looks like we're going to be $300 million to the plus of what we thought we were going to be. And recently during a bond sale, the state received another couple $100 million in bond premiums, and I won't get into the details of what all that means, but it's good stuff. Bottom line is that we're constantly evaluating everything day in and day out. I'm constantly on Zoom calls trying to figure out exactly our status, the status of monies that have been spent, and the status of incoming revenues and what we can do with it all. So I don't know how much more you want me to go on. I feel like I'm living this life every day to hopefully get it right. We're trying to be very careful about what we do.
Well, before I move over to Delegate Feldmark, since you are talking about the budget, we did have a number of questions related to the budget. And as you enter into the General Assembly, one of Governor Hogan's, I guess, significant vetoes at the end of last session was he looked at all the expenditures in relation to COVID-19, and he looked at a lot of the bills that passed to reduce, I guess, overall expenditures, including the Kerwin education bill. So going into the next session and recognizing these budget concerns that you have already related to COVID-19, are you looking to override any of those vetoes as we enter into the next session?
So probably the easiest one to talk about is Kerwin in sort of the context of all that, and it's one most people are interested in. I think that the simple answer is when we left and when we passed the final version of Kerwin, we did not, we anticipated the possibility of a downturn. And such, we included provisions that would cut off the additional spending, even if we implemented the policy. So it was our opinion, in my opinion, that the governor really didn't need to do that veto. I think it was certainly a statement about spending, but it wasn't a fact of reality in terms of what would have happened, because the budget would not have been increased based on the revenue estimates that have been coming in. There was a side effect also to his veto, and that was that there was associated school construction dollars. And those school construction dollars were connected to the governor's, to the Kerwin bill and to the veto that he did. In my opinion, this was the worst of times to be vetoing that, because those school construction dollars are about jobs. And I believe that infrastructure bills are certainly a reasonable thing to do in a down economy to help spur the economy. And it is my firm belief at the end of the day, we will go back in and we will, with the same care about the impact on the overall budget, we will make sure that the funding levels don't put an additional strain on the budget. But at the same time, I suspect we will try to move forward with some of the policy initiatives and have things ready when the economy does turn, because it's going to turn, and we're going to get out of this. And when we do, we're going to have to do some catch-up work with our kids in schools. And we need to do the very best that we possibly can to ensure their success. And the policy behind Kerwin is something that we will need to keep moving forward. And in addition, specifically though, that relates to money, I suspect we will be reconfiguring and how we vote on that portion that was for school construction, so we can get those schools built and we can get folks in those jobs that will be producing those schools.
Thank you. Delegate Feldmark, I would like to introduce you. You were recently appointed the chair of the Howard County delegation. So I would like you to make a few remarks about your priorities with the delegation this upcoming session.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think, looking forward at the next session and thinking about where we are now, we adjourned early on March 18th. Okay, it was the first time the General Assembly adjourned early since the Civil War, and that was just about 5 months ago. And we are just about 5 months from when we are scheduled to reconvene for the 2021 session. 5 months ago, I don't think any of us, certainly very few of us, had a full understanding of what these past 5 months would look like. And I think we have a limited understanding of what the next 5 months will look like. So I think anyone who, beyond the budget, which is the one item that as a General Assembly we must deal with, we must pass a budget. Beyond the budget, I think anyone speaking with great certainty about what's going to happen next session is either not paying attention or not being honest, either with you or with themselves, right? So I will not pretend to be able to predict what next session will look like and what priorities beyond dealing with the budget and responding to the crisis that we're in. And I think that will be the top priority. How do we support our businesses? How do we support our residents? How do we support the overall economic recovery? And I think that's going to be, the county executive spoke earlier about the partnership that we have. I think it's a very strong working relationship between the delegation and the county. And I think that's going to be our focus, is how we help rebuild and come out in a stronger place. I do want to, because I have the opportunity, talk about two things that are really important before we get to next session. And I'm taking any and every opportunity to raise these two issues. One is the November election. And there is a lot of confusion about what is happening with the primarily mail-in ballot election. The June 2nd primary, registered voters, eligible voters received a ballot in the mail. There are a lot of Howard County residents, smart, well-informed, engaged, active residents who think they're getting a ballot in the mail, and you will not unless you request one. Now, you can go online to the Board of Elections and request your mail-in ballot now. I strongly encourage you to do that. I am not just speaking to you as individual voters. I'm reaching out to you and asking for your help as community leaders to spread the word that folks need to request their ballots. The governor made a decision not to mail the ballots, to instead mail ballot applications. I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. The problem is, if most voters wait until they receive their application to request their ballot, we will overwhelm our local boards of elections and the ballots won't get out in time. Every system has a limited capacity and we need to start requesting those ballots early. This is another kind of flattening the curve. Okay, we need to make the election to request those ballots early. So please reach out to your employees, reach out to your social networks, your professional networks, or faith communities. Get folks requesting their ballots as soon as possible. The second thing, again, very important, we're talking about budget challenges, and one important piece of our budget situation is the federal aid we receive, and we need folks to respond to the census. There's a decision, we're in the phase now where census is following up on non-response, but that period has been cut short, and we need every Howard County resident, every Marylander to be counted so that we get our full federal support as we are working on facing these budget challenges in the upcoming years. So a little bit of a tangent, but please, I'm asking you, use your leadership networks to spread that word so that we're in the best position possible moving forward.
Thank you.
Those were two. I just want to say beyond that, I want to hear from you, because when we go back, we need your perspective to be able to address where we are in January.
Great. Thank you so much, Delegate Feldmark. And we'll follow up with questions. I do want to introduce Delegate Kittleman. I do not see her on my screen. I am sure she's here. Delegate Kittleman.
Yes, I am. Oh. I apologize that I don't have my photo up, but I have a separate camera giving me difficulties today. Just four things that I want to mention. The first being, I think, despite some of my concerns initially, that we are very fortunate in having a governor who has made Maryland a real, we have done about as well as you can do in this unfortunate situation. I agree with my fellow delegates. I think that it's a good idea, Delegate Feldmark, to start asking for mail-in ballots early. But I am, again, extremely pleased that we're doing it this way, where you must request a ballot and that we are sending out requests because it really limits the opportunity for ballots going out to people who are no longer here, who are have moved, who are dead. And that's just something that can be very scary. So we're going to have, I think at this point, 8 days of early voting. And hopefully everyone will have as good an opportunity to vote as we ever have. My biggest issue is, the third thing is schools. We have been following the data. Everyone says, follow the experts. What do they say? Well, that's what we're going to do. If you look on the CDC website, you will see that the opinion of the health experts is that to keep kids on virtual learning as opposed to going back to school in person is a negative impact and on their health. There's a lot of very good information. There's good information for parents. And I think the issue may be settled, but I believe that the right thing to do is to give parents a choice to have schools open, to deal with all of those difficult things such as buses. I think parents would be willing to drive. There are a lot of different issues that can be discussed if that is your goal. But then every parent who does not want to send their kids can make that choice. Finally, just about the budget, I'm on appropriations and we're having a Zoom meeting this afternoon. I think that it is, as Delegate Feldmark said, nobody can really make any reasonable statement about what is going to happen. My fear is because we have lost so much over this time that we're going to have to be looking at cuts, and there isn't anyone in the state, particularly politicians, who want to talk about cuts. But if the money isn't there, even with the federal help, there is a huge impact that is going to be felt in cuts, and we should start thinking about it now. And the last thing that I will say with respect to the budget is I think we should move forward with the school construction. That is not involved with, well, it is involved with the general fund, but it is done through the Stadium Authority. The impact on the budget is different. I think it's something that we can do, and it's something that has been needed to be done. And hopefully that will be the one thing that we can move forward on. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to open it up to questions. So if anyone has any questions, additional questions, they can again put that in the chat, raise your hand, unmute, jump in. Like I said, it's pretty informal. But one of the questions that we had, and anyone can answer this, so please feel free to jump in, was the Maryland minimum wage increases that are expected in the upcoming year, and in relation to the impact in small businesses and the fact that they're struggling. Is the General Assembly, there's a provision, I think, in the legislation that allows the General Assembly to put a hold on that in light of significant concerns or budget concerns or economic concerns. Would that be a consideration going into this session?
So I can speak to that. It actually the provision for the pause, if it's necessitated for economic conditions, that's actually a decision that the Board of Public Works would make. So the scheduled increase in the minimum wage takes effect on January 1st, which is before we would convene for our next session. I believe the Board of Public Works makes that determination by October. And so that's actually not a General Assembly matter for the session, but something that would happen before we reconvene.
Okay, that's great. Did anyone else have any comments on that? Okay. One of the other questions that has come up, especially during the COVID pandemic, is the consideration of liability concerns amidst small businesses. And we've heard this at the federal level, and it has been debated as to whether there are any protections for business owners or related to the COVID pandemic. Has that been a discussion in the General Assembly, or would that be a discussion going into next session?
Well, I mean, first off, it's a discussion that's ongoing, as we know, and is part of the negotiations on the federal level right now. And my belief is that that certainly is a place that makes the most sense. It would make it the clearest, and across the country would be the most logical way to do it. Assuming that they don't, we can't do anything at the moment. And it would have to be an issue for us when we come back in session. I think in my mind, the answer is certainly for individuals who are doing all the right things to protect their employees and their customers and all the rest. It seems to me that it would be wrong if we didn't figure out something to provide some relief or cover from legal action as they are trying to conduct business in very complicated times. Of course, that should never stop action against bad actors and individuals who are reckless in these contexts should certainly be, in my opinion, going after.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think that is our time for our members of the General Assembly. I want to thank you all for participating and taking time. Again, it will be an interesting and new General Assembly in 2021, but again, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Leonardo.
Thank you, Cheryl. And again, thank you, Senator Gazzone, Delegate Felmart, and Delegate Kittleman. And so with that, we're going to now get ready to actually make a transition from the state policies to our county council. And I'm going to ask Cole Schnorf, who is with Mannequin and also a former chamber board member and chair of the Legislative Affairs Committee, to get ready. And we're going to have Council Chair Deb Young, who is we're going to have some conversation with about things going on with our county council. And so, Cole, I am going to turn it over to you and Councilwoman Young.
Thank you, Leonardo, and thanks all of you for joining us this morning. I would encourage all of you to use the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I haven't seen any questions pop up there yet this morning. I'm kind of surprised. So if you do have any, please enter it there, and I'll read it to Chair Young as we go through our discussion this morning. Council Chair Deb Young is in the middle of her first term as a council chair. There's been quite a bit of legislation gone through in the past 2 years, and obviously we're in challenging times. So Chair Young is going to give a few opening remarks. Then I have some questions that I'll ask in case none of you come up with any questions. But please, if you have something you'd like to address to the council chair, please enter it in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and ask the questions that I've prepared in advance. So Chair Young, if you would take it away and give some opening remarks, please.
Well, thank you all. And cheers with my cup of coffee. I do miss seeing everybody in person. And I keep thinking about last year's wonderful breakfast, Leonardo, where we had wonderful fresh fruit and great pastries. And here we all are in our virtual environment, one which, as many of you on this screen can imagine, I am at this point in our legislative world extremely used to, but wish that I didn't have to be. We have had probably 200 or 300 hours at this point of virtual meetings, which I've chaired in this unusual environment. And I have to say that it is challenging, as I'm sure that you all have seen as well. And it is a challenging time in many ways to be on the county council. We have competing interests, which we are all trying very hard to balance. My focus has been to try as hard as possible to maintain a strong and diverse tax base, to encourage commercial development, to ensure that the development that we do have is sensitive to the environment and climate change resiliency, and probably most important, because we know that this is the economic driver of our county, to ensure that our school system is strong by providing the funding, all the funding that we can for construction and operating needs. And as a follow-up, I certainly want to give a shout out to our state delegation. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much for everything that you guys are doing to try and get that those construction funds out of that budget so that we can continue with meeting the needs of our school district, which I believe are in the $500 million range. So we know that that there are great needs there, and we are doing whatever we can to try and meet them. We have the general plan update coming, and I know that Director Gowan is going to be speaking about that. We have a once in a decade opportunity to try and make sure that the general plan meets the needs of everybody in the county. And as we have become a built out county, those needs are and have been changing. Who knows what the future will bring? I think at this point, the best we can say is that the predictability is unpredictable, because we don't, none of us have a crystal ball that will tell us how this will all end. And I know that there are a lot of people who are trying really hard to make sure that it ends in a way that is most positive for those of us in Howard County, as well as in the state of Maryland. And for that, I want to also have a shout out here to our congressional delegation, who have been trying really hard to ensure that federal funding is coming our way and that we can meet the needs of all of our citizens, which, as Dr. Ball pointed out, at this point are great. We have, small businesses that are struggling. We have individuals who are trying to pay their rent. We have tried to come up with eviction assistance and rent assistance. And every time we turn around, there's a new group that is asking us, the county council, to see if we can meet their needs. And as we all know, we have had, at this point, I think we looked just last week, 43,000 people had filed for unemployment in Howard County. So that's a pretty big number. And it can have a significant impact in the years to come. I hope that we will be able to continue to meet all the needs of our citizens, because so far I think that we have done that. I am really heartened by what I have seen in the community when it comes to individuals helping community members who do need that help. I think at this point we have something like 12 or 14 pop-up food pantries that have been run by people who are simply donating their time week after week, day after day, and people who are donating their money to make sure that those food pantries are stocked. The lines are long. I've gone out and I have volunteered at a couple of those food pantries in the District 4 area. I believe Delegate Feldmark has as well. I think I saw, I thought so. And I know that the need is great, but there are people in this community who are trying really hard to meet that need and who feel very strongly about what they can do to make sure that everyone in this community can stay afloat. So on that note, I want to also thank the business community for all that you've done to support the county, to support the residents of the county council, and the county executive. We need your help, and we appreciate all that you've done.
All right, thank you for those opening remarks. We do actually have a couple questions in the chat box, so I'll read the first one here. Housing and commercial development has typically led the economy out of recessions. Over the past few years, the county council has passed a number of bills that have raised the cost of development and also limited development. Prior to COVID, these policies had already impacted growth. Does the council have any ideas to encourage job creation through development?
Well, we did pass the school surcharge tax last year, and it was a unanimous decision of the county council to pass that school surcharge tax. There was no doubt, I think, in anybody's mind on the county council that the school construction needs were simply too great to continue at the $1.32 per square foot that it had been for 19 years. I am pleased, though, to say that we were very sensitive. The majority of the council was very sensitive to the needs of the commercial sector a few months ago when a recordation tax increase came before us, and the commercial developers, including you, Cole, came and testified and let us know the impact that that recordation tax would have on the commercial sector. And ultimately, we were successful in keeping the recordation tax from being passed. So I'm hoping that that will continue to spur commercial development. I know that we certainly heard that if we had passed that tax, it would have hurt commercial development in Howard County. So it is something that we are aware of, and that I hope we will continue to ensure that commercial development can continue.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely appreciate your support on that piece of legislation. So that was much appreciated. I know an area of interest to you is education. And I don't know if you remember, but the last year's meet and greet, you and I had a fairly spirited conversation about the educational issue of the day then was redistricting. You and I both have children that went to Wild Lake High School, and we didn't really like the way Wild Lake was being portrayed in a lot of that discussion.
Yes.
This year's big educational issue of discussion is the in-school versus virtual learning. So I was wondering if you could comment on that. I mean, we'll have the Board of Education next, so it's primarily their area, but you do approve their funding. And then another educational issue, if you could touch on as well, is the constrained open and closed school chart. And in particular within your district, I think there's some issues that you wanted to mention there.
So virtual learning, I'm sure the school board, just like the county council, is getting gobs of emails saying, whatever you do, don't open the schools. It will be a horrible thing. Or, I can't believe you're not opening the schools. It's even worse that you're not opening the schools. So we, of course, are hearing both sides of that argument. And I think my own personal feeling is, after seeing what happened in Georgia and Florida, we certainly have made the right decision for this first quarter. I am hoping that as things go on, that we, and I don't know that the school district can do this because I'm not sure that this is their expertise, but that with the help of the health department, we can develop a metric or metrics that will allow us to continue to evaluate whether or not the schools need to be closed. And if we get to the point with these metrics that we will be able to say, okay, now it's safe to open the schools, even if that does happen before January 28th. I know that people are very concerned about the kids losing so much time in school, losing that ability to be with other children their age, that all that developmental activity that goes on when you're in a school setting. And I am hopeful that if we get to a point where the metrics say that we can reopen school, that we will. But I know that the school district will continue to do what they think is the safest thing for our entire community. And then the other question was constrained, the allocations and the constrained situation that looks like will be arising, particularly in the downtown Columbia area. The school district is predicting that by 2026, we will be 500 students over capacity in the downtown Columbia area, which will significantly affect at least 3 of the elementary schools, Running Brook, Bryant Woods, and Swansfield. And when you're 500 over capacity, that's pretty much a school. But I know Vicki Cotroneo will probably talk about that as well. There is nobody who is more expert on school allocations than Vicki Cotroneo. So I look forward to hearing from her. But I will say this, that we continue, as I already said once before, to have great capital needs in the school district. And if we do have 500 students over capacity in 6 years, and we need a new school, well, at this point, elementary schools cost around $52 million. And that will mean a significant capital cost both to the county and to the state. Heads up, people, okay. We will, this is that's just the way it is, because we do continue to keep growing. So I just want to put that on everybody's radar screen. I will say this, that we actually had a special meeting that is required by code with the HCPSS and the BOE to address these issues, the open and the closed chart. And one of the things that we decided in that meeting is that we would meet in subgroups in order to try and find ways to better align allocations with school planning in the future so that it was more predictable for everybody. Because if there's anything that I hear from residential developers, it is the need for predictability. So if we can get to that point, and I know Director Gowan is also on this call, and she has been very generous in allowing us to use Jeff Bronow, who is the expert in the county government on these issues. And we will continue to try as hard as we can to make sure that we can provide that predictability to the residential developers.
Thank you. As we discussed yesterday, 15 minutes flies by. We had no trouble.
15 minutes already?
Yeah, oh yeah. I think we talked for an hour yesterday, but yes, our time is up. So thank you very much for your comments and answering the questions, for being with us here today. I'm going to hand it back to Leonardo to move on to the next part of the program.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Cole, and thank you, Councilwoman Young. And so with that, and I think the conversation that we had around education really now creates a good transition into having a conversation now and hearing from the Board of Ed. And so I'm going to ask Beth Haynes, who chairs the Chamber's Education and Workforce Development Subcommittee of the Legislative Affairs Committee. She is going to have some dialogue now with Vice Chair Vicki Cotroneo. Also, I want to recognize, as he wasn't mentioned earlier, but the Board of Ed School Board student board member is actually on as well. And so I want to acknowledge Zach Kuhn, or Kung, I think that may be the correct pronunciation, but, and accept my apologies if I said it incorrectly, but I want to just acknowledge him that he's joined us as well. But with that, I'm going to let Beth take it away.
Good morning, I'm Beth Haynes. I'm the Assistant Branch Manager of the Central Branch of Howard County Library System. I'm a member of the Maryland Bar. I'd like to thank our CEO and President, Tonya Akins, who is here, for her support and leadership. I'd like to thank the members of the business community, our business partners, our elected officials, and really the entire Howard County community for the support which has enabled us to continue serving our community throughout these times. Now, Vice Chairman Cotroneo is a graduate of the University of Maryland. She served as a pediatric nurse and as a researcher. So we thank her for those services. We also thank her for serving our community and our precious, precious assets, and that is our children and students. And we'd like to ask her if she'd like to make some remarks now.
Well, let's see here. I know I saw her come in. I wonder if we're having any technical difficulties here. Vicky, are you present? You still there? Well, maybe what we'll do while we wait on Vicky to come back, Zach, I think, it's always interesting to, obviously you're on the Board of Ed representing the student body. And quite often, I would say in maybe forums like this, we maybe talk about students and we talk about student experiences, but we actually never hear from them. And so actually maybe Zach, as you've been listening and talking obviously to your peers, hey, why don't you maybe share just some of your thoughts, obviously, as I'm assuming probably a rising senior or senior, and all that's maybe going through your mind and your peers, and as you have these conversations as well. So maybe why don't you share a few comments with us?
Yes, thank you for having me. And I believe I did see Ms. Petronio. I think she's having problems with her microphone. Okay. But I'm a rising senior at Howard High School and was recently elected as the student member of the Board of Education. For those who do not know about the student member has an equal vote to the adult board members on all except budget, personnel, and redistricting. I just want to quickly talk about the reopening process, or actually the fall planning process. So as a senior, and most of the comments I've heard are kids really feeling sad about what they're missing out on. But I think what a lot of students understand, and especially the community and our educators, is that we don't want to put kids and educators in a building that isn't safe, right? So safety really has to be our priority. One kid on a ventilator isn't worth it. One staff member on a ventilator isn't worth it. And so I hear many, many comments from the community, and a lot of them just underpin the importance of equity in the reopening process, but also safety. So if Ms. Petronio can turn her mic on, I'll pass it over to her. Ms. Petronio, we can't hear you.
Is she on a cell phone, Zach? Because I see a couple of cell phone numbers here, but I don't recognize the numbers.
Yeah, I believe it is.
Okay, if you could maybe just tell me the last 4 digits, then we can actually unmute her on our side.
Let's see, I don't know which number she's using, so.
Okay.
Hey, Leonardo.
Well, while we do this.
Leonardo,
yes.
Can you hear me? This is Jahan Tafsadiki. It's the number that ends in
I can hear you.
2547. If you can unmute.
Okay, got it. I've just done it here. I'm hitting unmute on my side, but I'm asking to unmute.
While we're doing that, I would like to encourage everyone in the community to utilize the resources through Howard County Library System. Our website is hclibrary.org. We are open for contactless pickup. We are open for phone calls. We are open for email. We are open for chat. And we have many, many resources for the business community on our website, and that can be availed through staff members.
Can you hear me now? This is Vicki.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I've had a lot of technical difficulties this morning, so I had to call in on my phone.
Would you like to
Good
make
morning,
some
everyone.
remarks, or would you like to jump in with a question?
Sorry about that. And thank you to everyone for filling in the silence for me. Good morning. Again, I'm Vicki Caternio, Vice Chair for the Board of Education. Chair Ellis was on vacation this week and asked me to fill in. Pleased to report that we have submitted our reopening plan to, or we're going to, this week, tomorrow is the deadline for our fall reopening plan, and it is online now. We recently received $13 million in CARES Act funding, which $11 million of that will go towards devices, and that will enable us to achieve one-to-one, which is extremely important, as you all know, for students to have devices to access the learning. We also are receiving over $2 million in CARES Act funding for tutoring. Haven't delineated quite specifically what that is going to entail and how that's going to look, but that will certainly assist us reaching some of our kids who are struggling the most. And then we just received approval for a grant for expanding our broadband service, 213,000, over 213,000 that will serve students with urban and rural. So we're really pleased about that, because without the broadband, the devices are not useful. And I just also want to thank Comcast for their partnership. They have been such a blessing for the school system in helping kids, underserved populations access technology through their partnership. It's been a wonderful partnership. So I just wanted to thank Comcast again. They've been just great. And I think that is the latest. That's all happened within the last week, I think. We also are moving forward with our 3 major construction projects: High School 13, Talbot Springs replacement, and Hammond. I want to thank the state delegation also for, I know, worked really hard to secure funding to make these projects a reality, and the shovels are in the ground for all 3 projects. But again, and I sort of, my calling card is deferred maintenance. We still have $1 billion in deferred maintenance, and most of those dollars are HVAC projects. And now, you know, with air quality and filtration and ventilation becoming major news because of the COVID, I think it's really important to keep this in mind. We do have challenges in that area, ensuring that our air quality is good, and that our air, the ventilation is adequate and it meets standards. So I always bring it up, but it's still with us, and it's even more important than usual because of the increased risk with COVID. I think we also have we continue to serve lunches, free and reduced meals, free to any child under the age of 18. We've served over 1 million meals, and this will continue this fall at every school site, I believe. We're going to have expand the program so that students who live near schools, they don't necessarily have to go to the school that they attend to get a meal. So quite pleased with that. And I think those are the major updates. I do agree, and I've heard the comments about, yes, we all agree that the best place for students is in the classroom. Teachers want to be there. We all want our kids back there, but the caveat is safely. And I think we need to have more discussions on what constitutes safety, and the metrics and the protocols that need to be in place for us to safely reopen our schools. My hope is that we will be opening schools for small groups for some of our most vulnerable students. Sort of, we could call it a soft opening, bring in students who need special services, who can't learn virtually. In fact, part of their IEP is they can't learn, they don't learn that way. They need to have in-person instruction, in-person interventions, perhaps our English language learners. So that is our hope, that we will open our schools for small group instruction. And I think that is, and I hope that, I know that Senator Pinsky is having an event today to talk about the metrics, to talk about standards, and what needs to be in place for us to open our schools. And so I think that will be a major topic, is what exactly, to have some sort of, plan that's specific to deliverables, to metrics that people, it's not just emotion, it's not how people feel, it's based on very real data. What is the data that we need to use? Because across the country, you'll find 50 different sets of data that constitutes opening schools. So I think these are important conversations that we will begin to have. And the costs that are associated with that. We do, as I think Chair Young talked about, the health department, we need to make sure that we have our partnership in place, that they can support quick testing turnaround, the contact tracing that will need to go on. That's, when you open schools, it increases the intensity of all the needs for the county, because you've just exponentially increased the number of people that are interacting with each other. So I think these are the conversations that we're going to need to have in the coming weeks as soon as possible, so that the public can have, they can have some sort of reassurance that that is our intention. We are opening back up in January, but we will open up and we will have done everything possible to ensure that the schools are safe and ready and that we have the resources in place, even custodial support, all of the things that will go into keeping our schools clean and sanitized and supported.
Thank you. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the school system for partnering with the library. It's been very positive collaboration, and it continues on through these times as well. We do have a question in chat, and that is, how do you respond to the advice and information on the CDC website that not reopening schools will cause more negative health issues than keeping kids at home on virtual learning?
Well, I think if you go to the links and the sublinks and all the links on the CDC website, you will see that the caveat is safely. So yes, parents should have a choice, but the choices should be safe. And it is, we could say, yes, the best place is in the, no one can argue with that. It is, it's a struggle. I mean, I know, many kids do not have home environments that are conducive to learning. The safest place for them is in the school. It's a reprieve. It's where they get their resources, it's where they get their meals, it's where they feel safe. So it's not been easy at all. I mean, I know that, there's just, as we keep saying, there's no good decision. As many emails we get for not reopening, we get, please, thank you for not reopening. So I think if this virus hasn't personally impacted people and ravaged a loved one, I think it's hard for people to put that into context. But yes, the CDC, of course, they're going, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, everyone is going to advise, yes, that's the best place for the kids, but we have to do it safely, and safely for our teachers and the staff and the custodians and all the adults in the building. They have very real concerns, and so we have to acknowledge that and keep that in mind as we plan. This is extremely new virus, and the research is changing, and people will glom onto a research paper that supports how they feel. And, these are small numbers. The research studies have been done, and now we keep seeing more research, bigger numbers of students studied. And just as Chair Young talked about the outbreaks in Georgia, and we can look at other countries and see the mistakes that they've made and what has been working. So yes, the CDC, if you go on, you click on their links, click on their recommendations, you will see these are the things that need to be in place. And if these things aren't in place, if your numbers, your community transmission rate, if your the contact tracing, the turnaround time and testing, if it's taking 10 days to get test results back, what does that mean for a school? Then do you quarantine the school for 10 days? You need to have all these other things in place to make it successful. We can't set ourselves up for failure to open and then 3 days later have to close down.
Well, I thank you very much. And unfortunately, we are out of time. We do have.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
But
thank you so much. Yes, we do have a tight agenda today.
And thank you both, Beth, as well as Vicki, for sharing with us. And certainly we wish we could stay on here longer, because obviously education, we know, is an
I'm sure
important
there's a lot of
topic.
questions.
And but with that, we've for our last segment here, we're going to turn our attention away from the elected officials but certainly to this group. Development is always of paramount of interest and so forth. And with the number of changes taking place within the county and so forth, we thought it was important to have with us our Director of Planning and Zoning to share some things that are going on there. And so I'm going to now ask Andrew Robinson, who co-chairs the Legislative Affairs Committee alongside Cheryl Brown, if you'll come forward, and we're going to have a little bit of dialogue with Amy Gowan, who is the Director of DPZ, or Department of Planning and Zoning, for this last segment before we wrap up. And so with that, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Leonardo, and hope everybody can hear me okay. I got nervous. I saw Amy disappear from my Zoom, but it looks like she got moved to another page, but I see her, which is good. Yeah, I'm sure, as all of you know, Amy is the Director of the Department of Planning and Zoning. I believe as of December of last year, that became official. And before that, she served as Deputy Director for a number of years. So she definitely knows the operations in the department very well. And wanted to give her an opportunity at the beginning here to simply give us an overview of, I know that you got a lot going on. You got general plan update, a lot of master plans that are in the works, but I wanted to give you an opportunity up front to just kind of give us a rough overview of where you see things headed in the next several months, what's kind of on your front burner, and maybe some challenges that you're seeing in light of, especially the COVID delays, how that's impacting your operations.
Great, thank you so much. And it's nice to see everyone virtually. It's been a really informative and interesting conversation this morning. And I can't help but sit here and think of how so much of this conversation ties into the general plan work that we have just started to embark on. The economic conversation, the social conversation, all of this is ties into a general plan update. And we launched our general plan update in July. The guidelines were approved by the County Council. The plan is going to be called HOCO by Design. And for anyone who is not familiar with it, please check out our website. But basically, this is a once in a decade opportunity to influence how this county grows, develops, how we respond to economic, environmental, and social changes over the next 20 years. This will look out to 2040. The projections that we'll be doing for this effort will be projections to 2040. We have a consulting team that we are very excited about. City Explained out of North Carolina is our lead consultant. And then we have a whole host of subject matter experts in transportation, environment. We have an ag economist. We have RC Elko. I'm sure most of you know of them. They're going to be doing our market and economic analysis. They're already doing some preliminary findings that they're starting to share with us. So we have a very reputable team that we'll be working with throughout this process. And so as I said, we launched it in July. The guidelines were adopted. Right now, our consultants are all doing their physical assessments of Howard County, and we are about to embark on the beginning of public engagement. So what that means, well, that's obviously been a challenge given COVID, and we had originally anticipated a very robust public engagement program that we then had to completely pivot and figure out how to do virtually. But it is a 2-year plan, and I failed to mention that. We are anticipating this to take about 2 years. So our hope is that, at some point during the second half of this process, we'll be able to meet in person again. But for now, we're working on how to engage virtually, and really are hopeful that this group, especially to help balance the conversation, can get engaged, to get your organizations and your sector engaged, because we really need to have a diversity of voices around the table for this effort. It is important. A couple of things that we're going to be doing right now, we have a public engagement survey that asking people, what is the best way for you to participate in this virtual world we're living in. After that, we're going to be looking to do what's called like an on the table engagement, where members of the public can host small group meetings with their family members or close friends. They can do it virtually, but to engage in a conversation about what's important to them and how Howard County should look to grow over the next 20 years. All of that information will be used to inform the growth scenario planning that we're doing. And just to speak to that a little bit, we our intention is to look at different growth scenarios within the county, and then to analyze the fiscal impacts associated with each of those, because we really want to make sure that the public understands what the fiscal impacts to the county's budget, our ability to provide services and amenities are with varying levels of growth. So all of this information will be used to inform those scenarios, and then at some point we'll go out with these different scenarios for public input as well. Just want to make sure I didn't miss any of the engagement. Oh, and there's a quality of life survey as well. So I guess my plea to this group is is to you know, to become involved and to help really spread the word and get as many people engaged in this planning conversation. Obviously, it's not something most people tend to be interested in. So that's always a eternal challenge for a planning department, is getting those out that don't otherwise engage in these types of activities. So that's a little bit about the general plan. I know there was been a lot of talk this morning about APFO and some of the impacts on development, and DPZ is watching that closely. We are trying to capture and analyze the data to be able to inform decision making, so that it is data driven and informed. We have seen a precipitous, and I have been bringing this up as much as I possibly can, precipitous decline in pre-submission community meetings since July of 2019. And that is a leading indicator of future development activity. So, you know, what that means is building permit activity 2 to 3 years from now, we are expecting to decline substantially based on the number of pre-submission community meetings. And just to give you some ballpark figures, on average, we have seen typically 30 to 40 pre-sub meetings over a 6-month period of time. On average, that's around maybe 750 units. The second half of 2019, there were 7 meetings, totaling 38 units. And so far for 2020, there's been 4 meetings totaling 15 units. So those are some significant numbers. We're looking at that. We're comparing that with the research that Urban Analytics did to evaluate the fiscal impacts of APFO. It is looking like the Urban Analytics study is coming in, you know, true to what we thought. It could actually be a greater reduction in revenues based on the slowdown that we're seeing. Building permit activity wise, we had a very slow 2019, one of the slowest in years, in decades probably. But we are seeing more building permit activity in 2020. Some of that is just because, you know, a lot of it is attributed to when apartments come online, because they really drive the numbers up. And we do think that that will increase at least this year, also because of the increase in the school surcharge. And I know a lot of projects are trying to get in before the end of this year to take advantage of some of the lower rate scales on that. And with the pre-submission community meetings, we have developed a way for people to do those virtually. So even despite COVID, we've come up with a way to do it virtually, and we're still really not seeing much activity there. So yeah, that's kind of a on a somber note. So I don't know if there's anything else. Did you want me to speak to some of the stuff we're doing around COVID, or?
Yeah, and I noticed that the DPZ has taken efforts to expand some of the temporary uses, things like that. Are you anticipating more flexibility given kind of the COVID challenges that we're seeing, and working with the zoning regs to kind of free up some business activity?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those that don't know, the executive did basically coordinate, and we developed a process to allow for restaurants to seat outside temporarily. It's a pretty fast track process. And we do that, DPZ does that in coordination with the health department and our licenses and permits. And so we first kind of tackled the restaurants, but we are starting to get requests from other businesses.
Mhm.
For example, we just had a fitness center come in and ask if they could do an outdoor tented operation. And so we're now looking to see how we can move some of those other businesses through this kind of temporary expedited process so that they can set up operations outside, especially for the remaining warmer weather months that we have. So yes.
Right. And are you getting requests in for, is it mainly outdoor activities? Because I know the zoning regs have always been pretty quiet on outdoor uses. Is that something that you're looking to make maybe a permanent change in some way, or is this kind of temporary emergency relief?
Yeah, right now it's primarily outdoor activity in parking areas. With the restaurants, some of it was request to use county property, open right of way, open space, etc. So we've just been making provisions to let people do that on a temporary basis during COVID, during the state of emergency, with the expectation that, you know, that those provisions would expire at the end of the pandemic. So yeah, it's mainly been pandemic focused at this point in time.
Now, in terms of your department, I know one of your goals going in when you took over as director was to fill some staffing gaps that you had due to some retirements and people moving on. Have you been able to make progress with that? And given the COVID delays and your staffing and all that, is that creating problems for you, or you're able to get the department the way you want it to look?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. That was a huge challenge when I stepped into this role. We had some very long tenured staff that had retired right as I was transitioning. So there was just so much movement within DPZ. It was created a lot. It was very challenging. But yes, I did fill those positions. As of April, I have a new chief of land development. I have a new deputy director that took over my old role. Very pleased with the hires so far. Of course, you know, nothing can replace that institutional knowledge that we lost. But it's been great to have, you know, new thoughts and ideas, new energy in the department, motivation, excitement. So I've been very pleased with that. That has helped out tremendously. You know, it was a tough budget year. And as you know, the assembly members talked about, and as Councilwoman Young talked about, there's just been staffing cutbacks across the county just due to the budget. So, you know, I feel like we're a lean and mean department. We're busy because we aren't bloated at all. I mean, everybody is very busy, and I personally, my philosophy is I don't fill positions unless I feel like there's a full-time workload. So, you know, we split the work, and I think right now we're at a comfortable level. But yeah, definitely have some concern for, you know, the future budget situation and how that may impact us in the future.
Right. Well, I think, Leonardo, and I know we're already a little bit over, but I don't know if you want us to continue or if you wanted to get to a wrap up now.
I guess what we can do is, and excuse me, I guess for sitting here, the energy lights have just gone off behind me. So I'm going to wave my arm for a second just to get the light to come back on. But
now
certainly I think we can see
from the camera.
I think we can see if we have maybe just one more question. If not, certainly I think we will wrap up. So if want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to ask any questions they might have.
Yeah, if anybody's got, I mean, there's nothing in the chat, and I would encourage people to definitely check out the general plan website. It was a great resource, the last general plan. This website, I'm sure, is going to be better because, I mean, it's been a long time, so the internet's gotten better, but it's a great resource for people who want to keep tabs on what's going on.
HOCO by design.
Yep.
Excellent. So with that, Amy, we want to thank you for joining us, as well as you, Andrew, for facilitating this conversation. And so as we actually prepare to wrap up, I want to thank all of you that joined us this morning, as well as our elected officials that participated. I want to acknowledge, I saw where Delegate Hill came in, and so I know we referenced her earlier, but we may have, I think, mentioned her prior to her actually being present. But again, I saw her come in on the participant line, so I want to thank her and recognize her as well. But again, thank all of you again for joining us. I want to thank our annual partners who I've referenced earlier, who are listed behind me on the background. Also want to thank Comcast for their continued support, both of the chamber as well as also within the Howard County community. I think as we heard from Vicki Cotroneo from the Board of Ed, certainly Comcast and their Essentials program has been instrumental in supporting many of our residents that do not have access to internet. And so for many of us, as we work from home, this is one of those things that we easily take for granted, but it's certainly something that that many are using their cell phones. And I even saw something yesterday where in some areas of the country and where there's limited data, people are going and sitting in the parking lots of libraries and checking emails and conducting business that way. And so let's not lose sight that, again, that this pandemic certainly is impacting many of us. Want to just also lastly reference a few upcoming events for your interest. For those of you that are government contractors or that serve them, our program next Wednesday, we're calling it Coronavirus Chronicles, Lessons Learned from the Global Pandemic. And this is specifically as it relates to government contractors. Certainly, we've talked a lot about hospitality and restaurants, but our contractors have unique challenges based upon whether or not they have to be on site to perform the work, whether or not they can remote in or if they can't because of security concerns and so forth. So that's going to be on the 19th. Also, our young professionals, they're going to have a part of the Accelerate series, Learning the Game, how to make strategic decisions in the workplace, ultimately looking at career advancement and lessons learned. We've got a great panel lined up for that. And then lastly, our Coffee with the President, which will be on the 27th. And then our Cyber Risk Management series, which will be on August 27th. And so again, check the chamber website, emails for upcoming events. But again, thank you all for coming. Have a great rest of your day and continue to stay safe and mask on, Maryland.
Thank you.